Welcome back to Hornet Nation Unfiltered. Travis Jarome joined today. And before I tell you who we're joined with today, I'll just tell you this is one of the exciting days for us here on the podcast because this is a gentleman that I watched play in Crampton Bowl for Alabama State. Not only play for Alabama State, but lead the Hornets to the HBCU National Championship in 1991. Joined today by Eddie Robinson, former Hornet, former NFL player, and all-around great guy. Eddie, great to have you here with us today.
It's great to be here. Whenever you can, reach out and I guess virtually touch the Alabama State fans, that's always a great thing. So, of course, we're all sitting at home, but you still have hopes and wishes that we'll get back out there and compete athletically and the kids can perform academically.
Before we get into where your roots and where you landed after college, let's talk about that 91 season. Leading up to that 91 season, I mean, the team was, you won 5 games, then you win 8 games, and then you get into that 91 season. You go 11-0-1. The only blemish, really not a loss, but Texas Southern, a 14-14 tie. But you go back and you look at the records, and I thought well enough to know you would have rather that tie come against a non-SWAC school.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it starts with Texas Southern was always a thorn in our side. Actually, I tell people I left Alabama State with like a 20-game unbeaten streak, and the last team we had lost to was Texas Southern in 1990, and that loss actually cost us a chance to tie for the SWAC championship in 1990, and we were the only team that had beat Jackson State and Grambling in the same year, but didn't win the SWAC or tied for the SWAC. So that tells you how big that loss was to Texas Southern in 90. Then they came back in 91 and tied us again. So that's one thing Johnny Cole would always tell me, the former coach at Alabama State and Texas Southern, was like, hey, man, Texas Southern was always a thorn on y'all side, even when y'all had those great teams. And so I live in Houston, so I hear that a lot. So
when you go and you look at that 91 season, did you know it was going to be a special year when you opened up with Jackson State and beat Jackson State by just 1 point?
Yeah, I think once we won, because we had a history of starting slow. We would always play a Labor Day Classic, which we would do well in. But then our first SWAC game was always Southern. And the first 3 years, Southern had beat us. And it was always like, we missed a field goal one year. It was like a last-second play. It was always like some type of heroics where we felt we were the better team. We would go on to have a good record. Southern would finish like 5-5, and we got their best game at the beginning of the year. And so, I mean, the 2 teams we lost to was Southern and Texas Southern in 1990. So going into 91, Jackson State had won the SWAC for 4 straight years, but we had actually beat them in 90, but we didn't win the SWAC. So once that game was moved to, the old Fulton County Stadium in Atlanta, everybody knew, I think, from Jackson State and Alabama State, whoever won that game would definitely be on the path to winning the SWAC title. And so, I mean, it was a huge game for us, and it was a great win for the school to beat Jackson State 2 years in a row. And keep in mind, they had won like 28 straight SWAC games. So Jackson State was at the top of the SWAC for some years.
When you talk about that schedule and you talk about that year, a lot of focus was on the SWAC because, you wanted to go out and you wanted to win the SWAC. You wanted to go compete in the bowl game. But there's 2 games that really stand out on that schedule that people kind of skim past. And then that's when things really started rolling for you. You beat Troy State 22-19, and they make the move to FBS not long after that. And then you beat a Sanford squad 31-28, and that Texas Southern game was in the midst of that. How important were those 2 for bragging rights, not only for you to say, hey, we may be able to run the table and may be able to finish undefeated, but now we have the rights to FCS football or Division I AA football at the time in the state of Alabama?
Yeah, and that was huge because, I mean, there was a time where if a kid didn't go to Auburn or Alabama, then, Alabama State was a very realistic destination. We were like that 3rd or 4th tier school in the state. And you think of all of the good players in the state, Auburn and Alabama can only get about 15 or 20 a year. So we had a lot of good guys, good players coming out of Mobile and Birmingham, all the different small towns in Alabama. And so, to play a Troy State, PWI, and then also Sanford, we had beat Samford the year before, but Terry Bowden was at Samford, and they were really on the come up. So they were a really good team. And so to beat both of those teams in the same year was huge for us. And Samford actually came to Crampton Bowl, which was big. We had went up there a year before. So I mean, it was a lot of big wins in that season. We started off slow, and I'm gonna blame that on Coach Markham with some like super hard training camps. I think nobody really recovered until like mid-September. But once we got going, offensively, it was, Ricky Jones was just, I tell everybody he was the Michael Vick before Michael Vick. And so had he came along 10 or 15 years later, he would have got drafted as a quarterback. But he got drafted as a safety and hadn't played safety since high school. So that lets you know, and in the 7th round, no less. So that lets you know what type of player he was. And he was just before his time. But a lot of great players on offense, Horace Brooks, Reggie Brown. We had, Coach Barlow, Reggie Barlow, he was a redshirt freshman and couldn't find the field and ended up getting drafted and playing 8 years in the NFL. So that lets you know what kind of players we had stacked ahead of him. It was just a great team to be on, and you got better from competing with your teammates because we talked a lot of trash to each other. You were gonna get embarrassed in practice, so you had to play hard. Every practice was like a game when you had that many guys who played. And we may have had at least 10 guys that got into NFL training camps from that team, from like 9th graders to freshmen to seniors.
When you talk about that team and you hit on how good that offense was after that Samford game, I'm just going to reel these scores off for you, and I know you remember them because it just the next one is the very first one is the one that stands out in memory banks across the nation. You beat Prairie View 92-0. You beat Alabama A&M in the Magic City Classic 59-13. You beat Grambling State 60-14. You beat Valley 49-20, and then you wrap it up with Johnson C. Smith and the Turkey Day 62-6 before you get to the Heritage Bowl. As a defense, how nice was it to see those numbers going up on the scoreboard?
Oh, man, it was awesome. Those guys could score. You had Paul Ashby, who was a backup running back, who was like leading the conference in kickoff returns. He returned 2 against Grambling in one game. Every time they would score, we would return the kicks all the way back. So, it was just so many good players. Like I said, it all started with Ricky Jones. You had like a Pat Johnson and on the offensive line who was all conference, Jackie Rowan from New Orleans who was all conference. So it was just the whole thing. And I think we both made each other better because, Coach Harper, who was the defense coordinator, and McKenzie, who was the offensive coordinator, we competed in practice. And so we knew, and he would tell us, man, if you can stop our offense, nobody in the SWAC's going to give us a problem. And that's the type of confidence we had. So, it was both sides making each other better. But going through the season, you can just tell, we were getting better and better. And the Prairie View, that was, I messed with the folks down here because it was 92-0. And of course, they had totally limited their scholarships, and they were just trying to hold on as a school and as a program. But the funny story on that is the score was 72-0 at halftime. So, I was an all-conference player and everything, and so I was the captain. So I go out there to take the coin toss to start the third quarter. And so I knew the referees and everything know me. So they were like, all right, Robinson, what we got here? Y'all want the ball? Y'all want kick or receive? So, and Coach Markham had told me, no, we want the ball. I'm like, Coach, it's 72. We want the ball. So I'm like, all right, Coach. So I'm going out there like, we really should be kicking off. The score is 72-0. So we go out there, and the referee looks at me. I said, Coach Markham said we want the ball. He said, man, you tell Coach Markham he ain't nothing. This is a shame. Alabama State will receive. Get on over there. So he threw me off the field because I had to listen to Coach Markham to take the ball in the second half. And we scored 20 more points, and so that's how the game got to 92-0.
Before we get to the bowl game, you kind of you just nonchalantly threw in there, I was just an all-conference player. You were a little more than an all-conference player at Alabama State, and I know you don't like to talk about it, but just talk about that, just the honors you were able to earn, and a lot of that was based on that year.
Yeah, being a walk-on and just, not having really a school to go to, I'm like so thankful and humbled that, Coach Markham gave me an opportunity because, I was accepted to Jackson State and accepted to FAMU, but that wasn't to play football. It was just, based on being a student. And so I knew I wanted to compete and play in college. And so to have an opportunity to go to Alabama State and to just be given a shot to be on the team, I ended up playing as a freshman just because we didn't have the bodies. I wasn't good enough to play as a freshman, but then once I moved to outside linebacker and Coach Pritchard, Coach Harper just, stayed on me. I talk with my son all the time. It was like a lot of moments where I felt like I couldn't make it. Would I be good enough, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of self-doubt. But I think the friends on the football team, it was just a constant, pushing each other. And, if not for the other guys on the team pushing me to work and believe in myself and to not give up, then I definitely wouldn't have made all those honors. So it was a team event because, I had a Anthony Schamberger from Mobile, playing the other outside linebacker. You had guys, Travis and all these young guys who were there. So you really knew we probably had 8 guys who were good enough to be starters at linebacker. So if you missed a practice or missed a game or didn't perform, so the pressure was on you. And I think that's what got me for the NFL because I already knew in college that if I missed a game or didn't play well, I had somebody else that was just as good as me that was like waiting, chomping at the bit to play. And coaches that would sit you down and bench you. I think one of the funniest things, we were playing, it must have been the Sanford game. I think that's when we had the last second field goal. Mm-hmm. So before the field goal, which is like, Bubba made this super long field goal for us to win. So they did like a throwback to the tight end play. So it was my job. I was covering the tight end, of course, and usually I covered the tight ends one-on-one. So the tight end blocked and he fell down. So then I took off running, trying to make a play. The tight end gets up, runs across the field. He catches the ball, scores a touchdown. So it was totally my fault. So Coach Harper, he gets me on the sideline. He said, man, Eddie, what happened? I said, man, the tight end fell down. So I explained to him the whole play. He said, man, you know what? That's some BS, man. We do that play every day in practice. Coach McKenzie ran that play like 3. He said, you know what, man? If we lose this game, it's your fault, man. It's all on you. You better hope we win this game. So I'm like, man, I'm on the sideline and guys are trying to console me. And it's like, he just kept, man, you supposed to be a smart player. You All-American, man. You ain't no All-American. So it was like probably my lowest moment at Alabama State. So out of everybody in that stadium that was hoping and praying for that field goal to go in, you could bet I was the biggest person. So we went on to win the game. And for my teammates, man, they still clown me about that today, man. You better be glad Bubba made that field goal. You might not have played anymore at Alabama State. So it was a super high level of accountability that really made us all better. And without those coaches and my teammates, pushing you, and at the same time, if you made a mistake, they were going to get on you. It's like nobody was exempt to get talked about on that bus ride back home if you didn't play well. And so it just forced you to like play under a pressure situation and just to get better.
So you talk about the field goal. That was the last time anybody came within 3 touchdowns, even 4 touchdowns of competing against you guys. And then you go to the bowl game. The bowl game is supposed to be, okay, we win, we're the national champions. This is going to be a tight game. You walk in, and it's basically you just walk in and you walk right back out the same way you walked in. It was almost unfair for North Carolina A&T to even be there. It almost looks like when you look at it on paper that you should have been playing the 1v1s for Alabama State and just put different jerseys on them because you're going to win 36-13. Just talk about that and talk about just the mentality that you had going into that game, and then realizing when you walked out, hey, we just ran an undefeated season. We're the HBCU national champions. First time we've ever done this.
Yeah, it was a great experience. We had went up to Grambling and we had beat them in the Pontiac Silverdome for us to win the SWAC, and so that was a huge moment. So the school had never won the SWAC conference, and so so that was our first goal. And then the bowl game was so first class. For us to go down there, we stayed. I think Alabama was actually playing in a bowl game when we were leaving. And so, I mean, they stayed in the same hotel we did. So we had like super nice meals. We had like a thing on a yacht. So it was just a beautiful experience. They did a great job. And it was so first class that the guys just all appreciated it, especially at HBCU at the, 1AA level to have that type of bowl game. But I think from a confidence standpoint, we were so confident as a team at that point that we felt like, we didn't really have a lot of respect for the MEAC anyway. It was always that the SWAC was the dominant conference in football and produced more players in the NFL, et cetera, et cetera. And so we felt like after beating Jackson, Grambling, all the SWAC schools, for us to lose to a MEAC school, that wasn't even in our mindset or psyche of how this could happen. Now, and ironically, my son plays at North Carolina A&T, but now, the MEAC kind of has the ups on the SWAC, especially in the Celebration Bowl. So, but going into that game, it was just a Ricky Jones show. It's kind of funny because with the whole COVID-19, I'm sitting at home, so I have like a box of 100 VCR tapes that I've been converting to a digital format for like the last 10 years. So now I'm actually getting it done. So one of the first tapes I put in was that Celebration Bowl or Heritage Bowl show, the whole highlight tape, which was like, I mean, Ricky Jones probably got drafted off of just that one game. I mean, playing at quarterback position, he ran the ball, threw the ball. He was, just miraculous. But it was just a great experience, and everybody just came together. I think the story about that game to me was a great experience, and it was very humbling. Coach Markham, you would think most guys who are at that level, and Coach Markham, you got to remember, he was an older head coach. He was an assistant for a very long time at Jackson State, so he had to wait to get his opportunity to be a head coach, and so he was well respected in HBCU football. And so, but at the same time, with him being at probably without a doubt, the best moment, the highest moment of his college coaching career, he also has so much respect for the other guys that came ahead of him. Coach Chasm actually coached him at Alcorn, who was the godfather of the SWAC, who recently passed away. And, of course, the legendary Eddie Robinson. You couldn't be a black college coach without respecting all of the things that Eddie Robinson had done over the years. So, usually in that situation, for a head coach to allow, other players to address his team, maybe the night before, maybe the week during practice. But the thing that stuck out to me about Coach Markham was he had so much respect for these other coaches that he allowed the godfather of the SWAC, Marino Chasm, and then, the legend of the SWAC, Eddie Robinson, to talk to us right before the game. And they didn't talk long, but it was just about, this is the SWAC, man. We don't lose to no MEAC schools. And that's kind of, how Chasm was. He's like, man, y'all go up there, y'all representing the SWAC. Y'all representing the best of black college. We ain't losing this game. And then Eddie Robinson followed in. You guys beat us in Detroit, then I know y'all going to. So at that point, then Coach Markham, hey, man, what else? So, I mean, in all fairness to A&T, when you got an Eddie Robinson, a Marino Chasm, and a Coach Markham speaking to a team before the game, I mean, we were at such a level to play. I don't think it was ever in doubt. So that was probably one of my greatest. I wish I could get somebody who actually taped that. And before, they didn't really have cameras in the locker room, but I would love to get that tape of those three guys talking to us, and as a pregame talk right before we went on the field.
And, not a lot of people know that, and I think you just made people's eyes go wide open with that story. But I got to ask. Yeah. Sons at A&T right now, who has the bragging rights in the house? Because A&T has been dominating the interconference rivalry, but you kind of owned it there for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, it was. I mean, the SWAC. The history of the SWAC conference is it's a remarkable conference. The unfortunate thing was that it was 100 years of SWAC football to be celebrated this year, and of course, the banquet and all of the plans and stuff had to be put on hold. But I mean, just looking at the players, I think one of the biggest joys I had playing in the NFL was that it was a SWAC player on every team. I mean, you got to think it was, always 8, 10, 12 guys getting drafted. I always tell people I'm an underachiever because in 1990 the SWAC Player of the Year was Aeneas Williams, drafted in the second round, went on to the Hall of Fame. I was SWAC Player of the Year in '91, drafted in the second round. The year after me, it was Michael Strahan, drafted in the first round as a Hall of Famer. So I'm like sitting in the middle like a super underachiever here. So, but it just shows you that the level of play that the conference had, and in the MEAC and the SWAC are, you're kind of down as far as getting that talent. And just because there's so many other schools, even in the state of Alabama, is not if you don't go to Alabama or Auburn, then Alabama State or A&M is your next choice. You have all these other different schools you have to compete with who are doing a good job. So it just makes it a little bit harder to get that athlete at the black colleges who can go on to that NFL level.
Now let's talk about the quote unquote underachiever, Eddie Robinson, drafted in the second round. And it's a little different today than it was then. Today is separated into 3-4 days. You actually went on the first day. Talk about just getting the call and just the feeling of when you knew that the next step of what you wanted to accomplish was about to happen.
Yeah, my goal was to play in the NFL since I was 8 years old, and sometimes it seemed very likely. Sometimes it seemed like it was just a dream, like it was a million miles away. And I think the hardest part for kids, and even for myself, is to work towards a goal and to kind of prepare yourself for success. So when the opportunity comes, you're ready. And so when I see guys who are like high school freshmen who want to go to college, who are guys who are freshmen in college who want to go to NFL, I say, so you have 5 years. How much better can you get in 5 years? So if you're working at something for 5 years diligently, you can get really good at it. But what happens is guys, you get distracted, you get down, it goes good, goes bad. So maybe you take a year off, you take 6 months off, but then the last 3 or 4 months when you have a chance, all of a sudden you want to do in 6 months what you should have done in 4 years, and then it's impossible to make that up. So I think with me, I was just very consistent and had the ability to look at the long-term goal and the long-term plan to say that, hey, this is what I want to do. And although today it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, I'm going to still work at it. So Coach McKenzie, I think the summer, he was the kind of the NFL recruiting coordinator, not recruiting coordinator, but the liaison with the NFL scouts. So I remember the summer before my senior year, I was going home to New Orleans, and we had a good spring practice and, did the pro day and all of that. And he was like, well, Eddie, man, I'm telling you, talking to the scouts, you're going to get drafted. You're going to get a chance to play in the NFL. So it's just going to be a matter of the things you do this summer and the fall, whether you get drafted early, get drafted late, or you a free agent. So and so he was basically telling me, from where I came as a freshman to where I am now, I'm real close to getting there. But now you got to go twice as hard. So, and it just, I think I drove home by myself that 4 hours from Montgomery to New Orleans. And I think, everybody was telling me I may get drafted, I'm All-American. But in your mind, you're still thinking, well, maybe. So I think when he told me that, I just drove home that whole 4 hours just thinking like, okay, this summer I'm going to work twice as hard. I'm gonna work out 2 times a day and really give myself an opportunity to do it. So when it actually happened, just sitting at my mom's house and had friends over, and of course the biggest embarrassment is you're hoping that you get drafted that day. And the Oilers told me that they would pick me in the second round if, it was a run and shoot era. So it was like, well, if this wide receiver had like 3 wide receivers, if these 3 guys aren't available, then we're going to pick you. So, and I was like, but they tell you that, and you don't really know if that's true or not. And so then it happened. Like those receivers were picked, and so then I was picked with the 50th pick, and from there it was just like everything happened. Probably the next 10 years happened really fast. But I tell kids, playing in the NFL is a great way to make a living. And I would definitely do it again if I had another opportunity, and just real blessed and fortunate that the hard work that I put into it was actually rewarded.
If you go back and you watch the draft from a couple years ago when Ray Lewis was on stage with Mel Kiper Jr. and they read his scouting report and told him how small he was.
Right.
And then you pull your stats up and look at the size, your size when you were drafted, you were the same exact size almost. What does that say for guys now that think they're too small or told they're too small? You were 6'1", 240 according to your NFL days, and I don't know if that's exactly what you were when you were drafted, but that's what they have you listed at, which is still smaller than what Ray Lewis was.
Yeah, and I think you always have the prototypical size, and I think the biggest thing about football is so many intangibles. It's unlike any other sport. You know, it's a lot of heart, desire, passion, you know, intelligence, awareness, film study. It's so many other things that go. I can get a big, pretty, you know, player that's, you know, 6'4", 250 pounds. He runs like the wind. He can dunk a basketball backwards. All of that does not equate to a good football player. It's like that little bit of extra that you have to have. And so, I mean, I think what happened to me my first year, I played, I was probably around 240, 245. And so you're always thinking that you're not going to be big enough, especially coming out of a small school. And so, but once you kind of see and touch the other guys and you get in the weight room with them, you're like, this is the guy that went to Oklahoma. We the same size. Or this is the guy that went to Texas. And so then you realize I can play with these guys. And I say, once you get over that mental hurdle, and then you can just become a football player. And so when Buddy Ryan came my second year, he was like, all of you linebackers are fat. You're overweight. You can't run. We need speed on defense. It was like a total transformation from being, I want big physical linebackers who could take on stuff, to I want guys who can run. So, I mean, that second year I went to like probably 237, maybe 235. And at that point, I never played more than like 235 or 236. But what it kind of made me realize is that in college, I was thinking I got to be big. I have to be this. And his thing was you need to be smart. You need to be strong. You have to be aggressive. And so it just kind of had a philosophy change. And it really worked out for me because I was able to lose a little bit of weight, you know, run faster. And my biggest thing was I was a smart player. So I was able to really anticipate and analyze and make a fine decision in a small amount of time. That way it seemed like I was faster than I was, but I was already 2 steps heading in the right direction most of the time.
And when you look at your numbers, you know, you call yourself an underachiever because of where you were as SWAC Player of the Year with Aeneas Williams, right. Michael Strahan booking. You look at your numbers at the end of the day, you retired 175 games, 163 of those you started in. You had 804 career tackles. 487 of those are solo, and that's hard to do in the NFL. I don't care what player it is, even if you're a corner. If 487 solo tackles, it's still a lot. But just, you know, you played with Houston, you played with Jacksonville, you played with Tennessee after the move to Tennessee, and then you retired after the 1 year with Buffalo. And if you go back and look, you had 90 tackles back in 98. Your best year, I think, was in the next year, 99 with Tennessee, when you had 82 tackles and you had 6 sacks. You know, you forced 3 fumbles. Just, you know, in the position you played, especially at Tennessee after the move, just talk about the years in the NFL. I mean, you play for some of the newer organizations, almost is what you can call them. You got Jacksonville, which was an expansion team. Tennessee had just made the move, so obviously, you know, you've got the move, so you're losing things in the move. Then you go to a Buffalo squad, and Buffalo, you're there in 02, and everybody knows what Buffalo is known for.
Right.
So, you know, but yeah, just talk about that because, you know, and we'll talk more about the Tennessee thing because there's an article that we're going to talk about when you went back. But just talk about just the journey in the NFL, just team to team, and just, you know, those 2 years in general we talked about. You played in 11 playoff games, and I think that gets lost on a lot of people because people only look at Super Bowl wins.
Yeah. I mean, I think playing in the Super Bowl, people always look at it as that was like I had to be the best moment, but you kind of think about, well, if it was one game, it'd probably be like the 99 championship game when I was with the Titans against the Jaguars. Probably because after my first 4 years in Oilers, it was I played with a lot of great players and against a lot of great playars. So when I tell people like, I played with Warren Moon, it's like, man, because he started in the 70s. So it's like he was at the end of his career when I got there, but it's just like a long time span of players, the Mike Munchaks and, Roger Craigs and Joe Montana. So when I tell people I played against all of those guys, they're like, man, how old are you? So, but, It was a great experience. I mean, starting off as a young guy in Houston, I mean, it was a super veteran team, and I guess I kind of learned early on about the business aspect of it. You know, guy Johnny Meads, who had went to Nicholls State, so he was a Louisiana guy, and he was a starter, lived across the street from me, and kind of helped me out to learn. And then after 4 games, they felt like I was, catching on to the defense well enough that they cut Johnny. And so, but not that he wasn't a good player, just we're going to go with the younger, cheaper guy who's ready to play now. And so he was like, hey, man, take advantage of the situation. He never showed me any animosity or anything. And he helped me basically to replace him. And so, he went on to play a couple more years at, I think, Redskins or somewhere else. But it just kind of showed me as a young player, like, never feel comfortable, always realize that the team is always looking for a cheaper version of yourself. They're always trying to replace you. So, which is kind of but at the same time, it taught me, don't be afraid to help out a young guy. You know what I'm saying? So, and my thing was, like Keith Bullock and guys that came along after me, I'm going to teach you everything I know. But it's still going to take you a while to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And so until you figure it out, I'm going to keep playing. And then I think my other philosophy, and I tell my son this, is I can probably, out of all of those games that I've played, and I've probably missed less than 3 practices in the whole 11 years. And my thought process was, if I miss a practice or miss a game or I take some time off, you may go in there and do a great job. And then they can say, hey, Eddie, you know what? Let the young guy get another rep. But if you never get in there, then they never will know how good you are till after I finish playing. And so and I probably should have took some time off from practice, but I always felt like, to be the hardest worker, which kind of went to that Coach Markham philosophy. He's just got to work hard. And so I think, probably those Tennessee Titan years were probably the best, because that's when we were actually winning a lot. I mean, we had 2 back-to-back 13-3 seasons. We lost in the Super Bowl to the Rams that one year and came back, probably had a better team, and lost to Baltimore with Dilfer at quarterback, and they probably had like 150 yards of offense, but some kind of way, every once in a while, the best team doesn't win. And I think the funny thing about that is I have a clock sitting up here, and Greg Williams gave it to us because we were the number 1 ranked defense in the NFL that year, because it always goes by yards. And so we were number 1 in probably like 7 or 8 categories. But because we didn't win in the playoffs, Baltimore, with the Ray Lewis defense gets oh man, that 99 Ravens defense is one of the best in the NFL. Yeah, but they weren't the number 1 ranked defense. We were, but we didn't win that playoff game. So I think the disappointing thing is to not win a championship with some of those really good Titans teams, but to play with Steve McNair, Eddie Georges, and then the names that people don't really know, like the Marcus Robinson, the Blaine Bishops, Josh Evans, guy who went to UAB, but was just, one of those guys that are just lifelong friends, the Greg Favors. I mean, those guys were like, we had one superstar in Javon Kearse, but then we had a whole bunch of just, bring your lunch bucket to work every day type of guys who would just knock the crap out you, intimidate you, talk bad to you, and relied and counted on each other 100%. And then Javon Kearse just kind of lit the match, and we had great teams from there on. So that was a great time to play in Tennessee, because the team was new and the city really took to us well. And playing the Super Bowl was a great experience, even though we didn't win. We had some guys who played 10, 15 years and didn't make the playoffs. So I was always appreciative of all of those playoff wins. And it's just a great feeling when you're in the playoffs and you can win a playoff game. I've been on some really good teams who lost in the playoffs, but we were obviously the better team. But then I've been on some teams that were just marginal. I think in Jacksonville, my first year there, when we went up to Denver and we beat them in the playoff game, and Kevin Hardy, he was like, a good friend of mine, one of my fraternity brothers. He was a first-round pick, and I was like, fifth-year player, free agent. So we're both in the hotel room the morning of the game. So he they had like Terrell Davis, Shannon Sharp. They were like a 25-point favorite. We just eked into the playoffs because the week before, kicker for what's his name? Nolan. He used to be a kicker with the Saints. Great Dane. I can't think of his name. But anyway, he shanked the field goal, and we beat the Falcons. on the 20-yard field goal that was missed. So had we lost that game, we wouldn't even have made the playoffs. But we snuck into the playoffs at 9-7. We were getting better, but we were a young team. So our first game, we go wild card game. We go up to Buffalo. So we shot Buffalo. Mark Brunell is playing great. Keenan McCardell. Defense was average, but we're kind of everything's clicking. So we beat Buffalo. So they're like, all right, expansion team, they got lucky they beat Buffalo. So then the next game is going up against Denver. So we're like a 25-point underdog. And so it's so funny. I'm talking to Kevin Hardy. I'm like, man, Kev, we got to go out there. We're going to play hard. Da, da, da. So he's like, man, next week I'm going to do so-and-so. There's no way we going to beat this team. So I'm like, hold up. I said, what you mean there's no way we going to win? So he's like, man, these boys, they good. I don't know how we won last week. So I think the team didn't have the confidence yet, but we were playing pretty good football. So, and in the back of my mind, I was thinking the same thing. Like, man, chances of winning this game is really small. But let's see how it goes. But, my rah-rah speech to him, and he was the other starting linebacker, like, man, look here, we go out there, punch these boys in the mouth. It's kind of cold out there. They don't think we're going to win. We keep the game close. We're going to win at the end. Let's go get this. So we go out there, and sure enough, the game stayed close. We had Natron Means, who was doing great. And they scored some offense and defensively. We had guys like it. I remember one of our safeties. He had like a one-on-one tackle with Terrell Davis, and I'm running because I'm like, there's no way he makes this tackle. Some kind of way, wow, he makes a great tackle. I'm like, man, it's gonna be a good day. It's just, as an athlete, it's hard to explain. You can sometimes maybe not be the best athlete, but have the best team, but everything is just kind of clicking. You're like, man, we haven't played this good all year. So then you start getting this confidence, then it gets infectious, and then all of a sudden you start thinking by halftime, hey, it's like a 3-point game. Maybe we can win this game. And then, we ultimately went on to win the game and went the next week to New England, and we lost in the AFC Championship game. But that was like a super playoff run, with a team that was just kind of figuring it out with an expansion team, and Coughlin was the coach. And so, but it was a great experience just to get guys, especially young guys, to start believing in something. And then of course we went on the next year and lost in the playoffs. But it's like stories like that, and with players, it's like. The big things are great in the NFL, but it's just like those small moments in the locker room that's kind of the funny stuff and the camaraderie, which was, I think, what guys really miss more than so being in front of the lights and the camera.
You're listening to Hornet Nation Unfiltered. Travis Jarome, joined by Alabama State great and former NFL great Eddie Robinson. And I hate to do this to you because we've been talking about all the good moments.
Okay.
What the question is I'm going to ask next is just that the inches in the Super Bowl. What was the feeling like? I was going to try to avoid it the whole time. And as you start talking about all the good moments and you brought the Super Bowl up, I just, you got to let the folks at home know because you were there. You were on the sideline. You saw how close it really was to getting that game forced into an overtime. Just talk about that moment as a pro and that moment as it unfolded in front of you.
Yeah, well, that team kept getting better. We, under Jeff Fisher, we kept going 8-8. Then when we moved to Nashville, I was with Jacksonville, but the team moved to Nashville. We went 8-8 one year, and I think we had lost to the Jaguars. Jaguars were like kind of at that level, and there's a team that I had left. And so I knew them quite well. I knew the players really well. So I think everybody, and I remember after losing to that Jaguar game, I was like, hey, man, there's no difference between the Titans today and the Jaguars a couple years ago. I used to play on that team, and I kind of shared the story with Kevin Hardy, how we thought we couldn't beat Denver, but we did. And it was just a mindset. And so I think what we realized, and I had to get the guys to realize, that we had the people in the room to win, but we just didn't have the mindset that we could win. And so, and I think that year, we went 13-3. And we beat Jacksonville twice in the regular season and also in the playoffs to get there. And so what really hurt us was that we didn't have a bye week. We were a wild card team. So we went to we played, of course, the Music City Miracle was at home against Buffalo. Mm-hmm. And then the next week we went to Indianapolis and beat a young Peyton Manning, and we beat Jacksonville. So we had 3 games in a row, 2 road games. And I think us, Yancey Thigpen got hurt, or Blaine Bishop got hurt. So we really weren't at our best. But still in all, we had Steve McNair. And I think, everybody knew that as long as we called them SWAC. So as long as you had Steve McNair, you felt like you had a chance. And so, playing against him as a freshman in college and watching him every year, I mean, just being so excited that he was on the field, it's like, man, that was like his moment to show everybody that, hey, a little country boy from Mississippi can make it big on a huge stage. So I think he forced everybody to play at a little bit higher level because he would play hurt. He would get beat up. He took criticism in the newspaper, in the media, and he just kept plugging along. So, I mean, you always say, man, if we could have got that game in overtime, or if Steve could have got one more chance with the ball, the what ifs. But yeah, it was a heartbreaking loss. I think if you'd have lost by 30, you could say, all right, well, we weren't the better team. But in that situation, no disrespect to the Rams, but they were both really good teams. But it was total difference. We were like a big physical, run the football power, and they were like fast, exciting, and everything. So it was a big clashes of styles. But it ended up being a great football game. But usually the great games are the ones that are really close, but you win at the end. So I think some years later I can say, yeah, that was a great football game. At the time I was like, I don't see what's so good about it. But it was still a great experience, a great team. I mean, those guys are probably some of the closest friends that I still talk to today. Greg Williams is still, a good friend of mine. He was a defense coordinator. So I think you kind of have those bonds with guys that you kind of go through the trenches with it like that.
Let's talk about Eddie Robinson getting to Alabama State from New Orleans, and you pass up a ton of SWAC schools to get to Montgomery, Alabama. You have to drive right through some of the city, and to this day they're probably still kicking themselves knowing that you drove right through their city, or just south or north of their city, and ended up at Alabama State. Just talk about Eddie Robinson getting the chance as a walk-on and being from New Orleans. Let's take it as far back as you want to take it, and then after this we'll get into some of the good stories that people don't know about these road trips.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think, the biggest thing with me, I was recruited probably by Tulane and Southern Miss was probably the two schools that recruited more than anything. I was playing offensive line and a little bit of defensive end. So probably about 6 feet, maybe about 225 pounds. So I was somewhat undersized, especially for the position, which I felt like I was playing under position. I was a good athlete. I was fast. I always tease the guys on my high school team. We had a guy named Errol Sanders who rushed for maybe like 800 yards. I'm like, man, I was faster than the fullback. I could beat you in the race. But I play like this pulling guard position. So I think that the two best things that helped me, one of the thing that helped me the most being a player, but it also probably hurt me the most from, little league, high school, all the way through my NFL days. I was a very unselfish player. If the coach said, hey, Eddie, we need somebody to kick field goals, go over there and practice. All right, coach, I'll try. So I always did whatever the coach wanted me to do, which was great because I was unselfish and it helped out. But at the same time, I think it hurts because then you can not kind of shine as an individual. So I think that's what kind of hurt me in high school a little bit. But, it was still a great experience. I love played for Coach Conlon, who was like a legendary high school coach at Brother Martin. So without being recruited, my dad worked at the Louisiana Superdome, and at the time, the SWAC office was in the Superdome. Alonzo Hardy was there, Dr. Frank was the commissioner, and I think one of the ladies worked there was Larita. And so it was one of those situations where my dad was like, well, hey, let me see who I can call. The SWAC office is there and stuff like that. And so, Coach Markham had just left Jackson State, and a lot of those guys in the SWAC office knew him from Jackson State. And so they made a call and said, hey, man, Alabama, which I had applied to Alabama State. And so, Alabama State to take him as a walk-on. So it's pretty much, all right, well, I can go there and walk on and let's give it a try. But I think even before that, it was a Coach Dewey. Coach Dewey was a high school coach at John McDonough High School and really successful. And he went on to coach at Southern. And so molded Aeneas Williams and a lot of good guys, Rufus Porters, those guys. So I was at the Sugar Bowl basketball classic. So it was Southern playing some other schools, Tulane and stuff, and it was in the Superdome where my dad worked. And so I talked to him and I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about going to Southern. I may have to be a walk-on and everything. And so Dewey, he's like a big guy, and those coaches are all legendary guys back in the day. He said, well, son, I don't know much about you, but I know you played at Brother Martin, and it's a pretty good high school. So I'm going to tell you what you do. Wherever you go, just do your best, stay swag, and stay black. And I was like, man, that just kind of stuck with me. So and I tell kids that today, man, where should I go? I say, hey, man, stay swag, stay black. You know what I'm saying? So, and just that coming from a coach, and I think coaches and people like me, retired players, current players, you know, when you're talking to a young kid, you never know what that young kid is thinking or what that kid is going through. And he may be a second away from quitting, but he may be a second away from being the next NFL MVP. Mm-hmm. And those words of encouragement, just to tell him, like Coach Dewey at Southern, who's a coach that I respected as a high school coach in New Orleans and as a coach on the college level where I was trying to go, him telling me hey, keep working at it. You have a chance. Don't give up and stay swag and stay black was like huge, because that made me say, hey, you know what? Maybe I was thinking that I couldn't play in college, but now I'm going to play in college. And I'm going to take that advice of what this guy told me. And so, and if not for that, and I think the thing that had just happened was Jerry Rice had just won the MVP in the Super Bowl. And so, and at the thing, they were like a whole lot of, the SWAC magazines and the media guide. It had Doug Williams, who had won the MVP, and it had Jerry Rice. And so I was like, man, I didn't know a whole lot about the SWAC conference, but I was like, wow, these are two Super Bowl MVP players who both went to a SWAC school, one in the Valley, one's to Grambling. And Coach Dewey told me, stay SWAC, stay black. So I'm going to go to Alabama State. So I think the thing that really attracted me was that Alabama State was in the SWAC. It was HBCU. And so I was like, hey, let me give this a try. I didn't realize that Alabama State had never won a SWAC championship. I wasn't very successful. I didn't really get to that part of it, but I knew they were in the SWAC conference, and I knew the history of the SWAC conference. So I think the history of the SWAC attracted me to Alabama State as much as anything else. And I think that's kind of huge. And that's something I think the kids who are at Alabama State and the fans really need to realize, that, the SWAC conference and the history of the conference, all of the men who have went through it and the coaches, male and female, because you had, a lot of tons of great players in all sports. And I think it's, just going to the SWAC Hall of Fame, which I go to just about every year, is just, I'm always like loving the history of it. And I get introduced to like 7 or 8 new coaches, like, Coach Jacket, who was at Prairie View, who was a track coach, Lavender. And so to hear her speak and her players come up and her talk about her accomplishments on the track field at Prairie View and the things they had to go through and overcome, it's like all of the coaches have the same story. We had to do, so much with so little, but we always accomplished it, made it work with a lot of love and hard work. And so those are the lessons I think you take as an athlete and just as a human being coming through the SWAC and through HBCU athletics. That's what helped me as a person.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. A lot of people get lost at just the legendary names that have come through the SWAC. And, just when you think about football, you think about Jerry Rice, you think about Doug Williams, Walter Payton, Aeneas Williams, Michael Strahan, Robert Brazile, just to name a few, all Hall of Famers, Super Bowl winners. I mean, so people get lost in that. And then you've got them in their sports. I mean, it's just so much that people don't know about the conference. Mm-hmm. But what does it mean when you hear those names, Hall of Famers, and then, and then as the list continues to go, then the Eddie Robinson name gets thrown out. I mean, it just – and I know you're humble, and I know you like to deflect back and say it was a team thing, but your name gets brought up now when you go back and people talk about the SWAC.
Yeah, I think it's just a great thing, and because everybody wants to work hard and accomplish things, and you want to get a pat on the back. I mean, you don't do it for self-adoration, but at the same time, it feels good to know that people can appreciate your story and the struggle and the hard work that you put into it, not just as a student, but also as an athlete, and all of because it's countless thousands of hours. I think with people, they see the finished product on Saturday or Sunday in the NFL, but they don't realize how many stadiums you ran by yourself, how many parties you didn't go to, how many times you went to bed early when other things were going on. They don't realize all the sacrifice of what it takes to get to be that level to compete. to be an athlete. And I think that's the things that you really appreciate when people say, hey, man, this guy's one of the, better players. He was good. Or when, I'll go through Alabama State and I'll see a kid and his dad is like, man, I see this guy right here. When I was in school, man, in 91, man, that team. And then it makes you feel good to say that you can put a smile on someone's face. And hopefully you can reach out to a younger kid and inspire someone to work just as hard as you did. And hopefully they'll make their dreams. But even if they don't, it's just the fact that you worked at it and tried hard. I mean, I think unless you are Tom Brady, who has just won an endless amount of Super Bowls and awards, I think every athlete retires. Like, I probably think about more of the tackles that I missed, more of the interceptions that I could have had than all of the plays that I did make. You're always thinking that I could have made one more play, And so, but I think once you work hard at it and you give it your best, then you can go out and say, hey, man, you know what? It was a great experience. I met some great friends and hopefully I influenced a lot of other people to work hard and to fulfill some of their dreams also.
Let's talk about some lighthearted moments when teams are on the road or in the locker room, and then, and I know you're going to hit on some Coach Markham points, and then we'll talk about him in just a minute. But just talk about some of the things that made Alabama State what it is, how fun it was to be a part of that program, how fun it was to be part of that team that fans may not know.
Yeah, I think it all starts with the Hornet Special, and the Hornet Special, that was the bus. I mean, it was like I don't think they still. I know they don't have that bus anymore, but it was it was like a civil rights bus. It had to have been. If I was on the bus in the late '80s, this bus had to be from like the early '70s. But it never broke down on us. You know what I'm saying? So that was the biggest thing. But I think the stories of riding on those bus trips, to Houston and back, and just it was always, we were super disciplined on the bus. Coach Markham always had everybody in charge, but it was just the unwritten rule. If you won, it was going to just be jokes and laughter the whole way back. If you lost, it was going to be total quiet the whole way back. So, I think the camaraderie and the closeness that the guys from, 88, 90, 91 from those years, it was all kind of woven together on those bus trips, because keep in mind, we're sitting on the bus. There's no cell phone. There's no TV. They may put on a radio station, but at the most part, all we had was each other. So we were just singing songs, laughing, talking about each other for like 6 hours there and 6 hours back. And so if you could imagine a couple, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids, it was just everything. We knew everything about everybody. I don't think anybody had any secrets. It was all full exposure, and that's what made it so great.
When you talk about a Coach Markham who just recently passed and held a special place, I know, in your heart, talk about what he meant not only to Alabama State, but what he meant to you as an individual.
Well, I think for me, he was like the person. I think out of all the things that he said, and I want to get with his son, and I have to give him a call because I want to get a book of his quotes. The man had a quote for everything, and so it's like, and then with my son, he's like, I'm like a quote guy too, so I'm always like, yeah, you work hard because do what's right because it's right. He's like, that's Coach Markham saying. I was like, yeah, that's cool. So it's like you get so many sayings. So I started looking up some of his quotes, you know what I'm saying? And so I think one was like, come hell or high water, sheep shit or shallow water, we gonna work today. So it's like, and so I looked up some of them. It's like, some of them like was an old country song that I said. So I was like, I don't know where where did he get these from? Because, you figure he could not have made them all up. But I think out of all of his quotes, the one that kind of stuck with me the most, like it was my freshman year, and he was like, well, I got to use his voice when I quote him. He was like, we gonna work y'all, and we gonna work you hard. Some of y'all gonna quit. Some of y'all, we want you to quit. And we got to trim the fat. It's like a fine piece of beef. And we won't get the fat off, so we got nothing but the good meat left. And so when y'all quit, y'all going to want to sneak out of here late at night. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be pulling your trunks out. You're going to hear them dragging out of the dormitory. They ain't man enough to leave in the daytime. They're going to sneak out in the middle of the night. Say, Pritchard, how many quit last night? He'd be like, Coach, I think 2 of them quit last night. And he'd say, so they ain't mad enough to quit on you, but if they gonna quit, we want them to quit now. We want them to quit in August when it's hot. We don't want them to quit in September when we got to play Jackson State. He said, but if you don't quit, and if you stay here, and if you do everything I tell you to do, and believe in me, I'll make you better than you ever dreamed you could be. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's kind of like almost, I kind of like it's like a 70s pimp line almost, like on a black exploitation film, because as a kid, I really believed that. And I took heart to that. Like, I felt like if I believed in those coaches and the other players and Coach Markham and did everything that he told us to do, that I would be better than I ever dreamed I could be. And that's exactly what happened. Because going to Alabama State, I wasn't expecting to be a second-round draft pick or play 11 years in the NFL. You know, if you'd have told me that when I pulled up the campus my freshman year in '88, and my mom just dropped me off and left, and so like, yeah, man, in 4 years you're gonna get drafted in the second round, I'd be like, man, get out of here. Yeah, right, okay, not me. I'm a walk-on. I don't even have a real position yet, and so. But it was really just a matter of, hey, guys, burn the midnight oil, go to bed on time, lift the weights, work hard, run the Hornet Stadium bleachers by yourself and nobody's out there but you and 2 of your teammates, get extra working out and stuff. So all of those things that I did, it wasn't a guarantee for success, but it's kind of like I talked about earlier. It gave me, like, I was preparing for success. So then when I did get to be 6'1", 240, and I could run a 4.7, and then the scouts came, then those things I did my freshman and sophomore year when everybody thought, well, why is this dude working so hard? He's not going to be anything. So but those things I did my freshman and sophomore year, then it built up to the success that I had in my junior and senior year. But if I wouldn't have believed in Coach Markham early on and then all of a sudden tried to cram it into 1 year, then it may not have worked out. So the biggest thing was just, it's like one thing he would always tell us is like, yeah, you can't be a leader if you don't let nobody follow your ass. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you can call yourself a leader, but if you look back and you by yourself, you're not really a leader. And I think the biggest thing about Coach Markham, he was a leader because everybody followed him. Like when you walked on the football field, he could be standing over in the corner with the bullhorn, but you knew who was the head coach. He always had that persona and that aura that he was in charge, that he was the head coach, and all the questions and responsibilities came back to him. And then he was never a guy who ever pointed blame on any other of the players. Like he, even when you knew it was our fault, and I think that's the one thing, the Buddy Ryans, the Jeff Fishers, the coaches that I really had, who I really respected over the years, it's like as a player, I know if I messed up. I know you told me that this was going to happen all week, and it didn't happen. But then, hey, when it came down to it, you took the blame in the newspaper, and you took this, and you might have came to me and said, now, look, I done bailed your butt out this time, so you owe me one. But the one thing you didn't do was throw me under the bus in front of the public and fans. And so Coach Markham was one of those guys who's like, hey, it ain't no pressure. The worst thing they're going to do is, fire me and send me home. Y'all going to keep your scholarships. Y'all going to graduate. So just go out there and play and have fun. Don't put any pressure on yourself to be great. Just go out there and play. And that's what he allowed us to do, because we knew that he wasn't afraid to, answer the tough questions or get fired. And that's what he would tell us. I'm sure he was. But in our minds, we felt like he was a person that had our back. And when you're 18, 19 away from home, you're looking for that person that you could trust and count on. And if things don't go wrong, he's not going to, just say, hey, well, those players didn't listen to me this week. That's why we lost.
Hornet Nation Unfiltered, Travis Jarome, joined by Eddie Robinson, former Alabama State Hornet grade and NFL grade. And Eddie, I got to ask this question. We talk about Coach Markham. We talk about all the players you played with. There's one person, though, that has been a mainstay at Alabama State when you were there, and it's still at Alabama State. and I think you know where I'm going with this is Peter Rabbit. Just talk about, was Peter Rabbit one of the first people you met on when you got dropped off? Because that seems to be the running story, is that every time somebody gets dropped off, and I think it's Keith White that told us a story earlier this year about how Peter Rabbit met him down at the bus station and got a cab, and they get into the cab, and Peter Rabbit said, "Coach sent me down here to pick you up," and he said, okay, and so they get in the cab, and when they pull up, Peter Rabbit looks at Keith and says, "You might want to pay the man." So, there's all kinds of Peter Rabbit stories about him showing up at Crampton Bowl at 6 o'clock in the morning for a 6 o'clock night game. He's still there. And to this day, still is the same person he was that I met back in the early 90s.
Yeah, I think, he's just one of the unique, individuals in the Alabama State history, and I would almost say college football history. I mean, he's one of those guys. I mean, we probably need to get NFL game day, college football game day, sorry about that, to do a special on him, because, I think it's just a great human interest story to have, one person to have that much dedication to a university and the program with very little give back. I think when Coach Barlow came in, it really helped him to, to kind of get his just rewards. And I know for 100% fact that he never did it out of, I want something back. He just did it out of love for the university and love for athletics and love for the football program. So, like I said, I was putting all of these VCR tapes onto DVD, onto digital format. So the one guy, when you see Bubba make that kick against was that Troy State or Stanford? That was Troy State.
It was, I think it was a Troy State game, the 22-19 game.
Right. And so, the one thing that you look is the guy that's under the goalpost is like Peter Rabbit, like jumping up and down. And so it's just like, man, you could just tell that there's just a love in his heart for the university and just always there. I guess I guess that's the litmus test. If a guy tells you he played for Alabama State, and you're like, do you know Peter Rabbit? If he says no, like, nah, he ain't played for Alabama State. So, he's definitely the one guy. Coaches and administrators and presidents have come and gone. But, he's been the guy that has been there, just so unselfish and willing to help. And I think you just have to tip your hat to a guy like that. So, and you love him. So.
Well, Eddie, this will be the last question. We appreciate your time today. Last question for you, though. Let's talk about Eddie Robinson off the field, post-football career, cyclist. Been to the Tour de France. Tour de France, according to this article I was reading earlier today.
Yeah.
Not just that, but you're an avid supporter of Alabama State University. You're, father, son plays at North Carolina A&T, coach, broadcaster. What haven't you done since your playing career isn't?
Well, that's a good question. So, I always get my guy Devin Wade here and does a local show, and he does a lot of stuff with KTSU. He's been around Texas Southern and Houston sports forever. So whenever we do our little podcast, and I kind of come on and help him out as a guest, and he's always like, "Man, tell me some of the non-traditional sports that you do." So it's like I'm like, I want to. I was up there at the Tour de France, and they had the time trial from Paris, Nice, and everything from Nice to Paris. So, and he kind of gets a kick that I'm always doing the non-traditional stuff. I go to a lot of Formula One races. So Lewis Hamilton's like, my favorite driver, and he's been winning a lot. So I'm always giving him these different quotes. So he's like, man, you just are all over the place. Like very interesting sports life. So, and I think, I don't know. I think I've just been one of those people. I read. I think I'm an avid reader of National Geographic. I've probably been subscribing to National Geographic for like almost the last 15 years, and I read every article every month. Even if I fall behind a couple months, I saw. And it just gives you a perspective. People think, oh, it's just talking about animals, but it's talking about life, sports, culture, history, medicine, just everything. So I think that helped to give me just a really broad viewpoint of life, and it always comes up with, man, that's a place that I would really like to go. You know what I'm saying? Just because it kind of just gives you these ideas of something that you would want to do, and just not to be a homebody. So I think when I first moved back to Houston in 2007, I joined like a little running club, and we started running. But then as you get older, into the knees and the back, so I started the cycling. So just with the competitive nature, I started riding a little faster than other people were faster than me. So then you get a better bike, then you start training, and you start looking at it on TV. And it's like the Tour of Flanders and the Paris-Roubaix and Liège-Bastogne-Liège, all of these great spring races and spring classics. And so next thing you know, you're a full-fledged cyclist. So it's just one of those things that I took to. But as a kid, like I always loved the Tour de France. Like I can remember buying a Centurion, 12-speed bicycle for like $150 and saving up my money. And I think what you're kind of learning now is that, with cycling, it's just such a real barrier for minority and African-American kids to get involved because it's a sport that's very expensive. And so, how many kids, like Nelson Bales is a guy that comes out here and rides with us. Of course, he was in the Olympics, I think, in 88 in LA, and he won a silver medal, I think it was, but either gold or silver medal. But here's a guy who was just a African-American, mail carrier and, just delivering packages in Brooklyn and got really good at it. And then he got an opportunity to be in the Olympics. So you think, how many guys didn't have that opportunity, but if they would have, that they could have done something great. So I think cycling and, golf and the non-traditional sports, Formula One racing, it's things where you see where a lot of minorities don't get opportunities to participate. And you have a couple people that are fans, but you wonder if those guys would have gotten a chance to do stuff other than just, basketball or football. So then I started, getting into baseball. My son wanted to play t-ball, so he was like 4 and 5. So I started coaching this little group of kids from 4 and 5, and now they're like all in high school. And so my goal is to get them all to high school and to college, and I knew nothing about baseball. I was a horrible baseball player, and so I went to a baseball all-star game with one of my friends. So now I go to the baseball all-star game every year. I go to way more, Astros games than anything else. So it's like huge Yankees fan, which is what Coach Markham and I had in common. So it's just kind of, life is like a river where it's going this way and that way. And then sometimes it just jumps the bank and goes its own path. So I think I just kind of, when something has an interest to me, I kind of really get into it. I don't know how to just kind of halfway do things. And so if I was going to be a T-ball coach, I was going to be the best T-ball coach. I would go to spring training to see how the major league players were preparing. And so once I went to my first spring training in Phoenix, so now I go every year. And I go every year for about 3 days, and I hike and I go to, so it's just kind of one of those things that has kind of evolved. But I feel like it's, it leads to good stories, and you can only live once. And I turned 50 this year, so I'm probably about halfway to the end, so knock on wood. So I think you just want to try to experience as much as you can.
Well, Eddie, we appreciate your time as always. And we're going to have to do this again later down the road. Once football season gets here, we're going to have to get you back on and actually talk football. And we'll make it a football-only podcast on that one. But, folks, that's Eddie Robinson, former Alabama State great, former NFL great here on Hornet Nation Unfiltered. Make sure you go back and listen to Dr. India Pleasant, former Alabama State soccer player, serving on the front lines in California, as she is a doctor in the state that was hit hardest by COVID-19 at the beginning. Eddie, again, we appreciate your time. And for those of you that are wondering what's down the road, go ahead and give you a little sneak peek. Remember the name Michael Coe, former Super Bowl winner, former Alabama State Hornet, Shamika Jackson, 2,000-point score. And then we're trying to get some of the other greats on as well, the Kevin Loaders of the world that live out in Houston. Just we're trying to let you, to bridge the gap for Alabama State, old and new, here on Hornet Nation Unfiltered. Eddie, again, appreciate your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Until next time, that's Eddie Robinson, Travis Jarome saying thank you for listening to Hornet Nation Unfiltered. You've been listening to Hornet Nation Unfiltered. We'll be back next week with another special guest from Alabama State's past. Until next time.